Please join me in welcoming Rick, and we're really eager to hear this presentation.
Well, I think it's important to better understand how we got to where we are today, and also where we're thinking about going in the future by taking a look first at the Transportation Fixed Guideway study that was done in 2005, because that really established the framework for the transportation improvements that we're looking to make. It truly was a long-term look for transportation needs. It was really focused on connectivity. Where's the housing demand going to be? Where are employment centers going to be located? What are those various activity centers that with which we need to connect, or to which we need to connect? And it also was a regional plan. It didn't just focus on Oklahoma City solely. We also looked north to Edmond, south to Norman, and east to Midwest City and Tinker Air Force Base, and then to the west side, we went to the west boundaries of Oklahoma City. Coming out of this report were really several recommendations, and I'm going to focus on one of those today when we talk about the bus system, but I'm also going to touch upon a couple others that are currently in process. There were 11 corridors that were identified in the system in terms of where we saw heavy travel. There were recommended technologies that go along with those. They involved commuter rail, bus rapid transit, streetcar, and I'm going to focus on one of them, and that is our bus system, because that's really what was the premise of, if any of these other systems, fixed guideway systems, are going to be successful, you have to have a good, robust rubber tire system to support those. I put this slide in the presentation just to give you some idea. The mayor mentioned in his opening remarks this morning that Oklahoma City is 620 square miles in size. I've superimposed or laid on top of the city diagram here. The black lines represent our current bus routes. And so you can see one of our challenges is just trying to service an area as large as Oklahoma City with the funding that's available to us. There are large areas of the 620 square miles of the city. We cover about 180 of those. So we're not even covering 25% of the city with our current bus system. There's been some discussion about, well, maybe a different approach is what we need to do. Do you try to service a large area, as we do right now, and don't do it very well, or do you shrink the service area and try to do a good job, but you cover a much, much smaller area? And so that really was one of the driving factors. There were others that caused us to really step back and take a look and call in NelsonNygaard to do a transit service analysis for us. And they were given 3 directives. One of them is, take a look at our existing system. What could we do to make it better, but you can't spend a dime more than what we've got today? And then the second focus was, if we get incremental funding to help improve the system, what would be the recommendations that you would make in terms of not only the recommendation itself, but the priority to that recommendation? And then finally, assume there is no financial restriction, what would you do? And so as not to recreate the wheel, we actually had them use our 2005 fixed guideway study to take a look at that and say, in the 9 years or the 8 years that have gone since that study, how would you modify what was proposed then in terms of this all-encompassing, wonderful, glorious system? What we hope to come out of the study was really to make some improvements to make it easier to make connections. Right now, most of our connections are made downtown at our downtown transit center, which means a lot of people are actually traveling out of their intended direction or desired direction in order to make a connection downtown. So how do we make better connections away from the downtown area? We also wanted a system that was easier to understand. And as you look at the map that's up on the screen right now, this is proposed, this is what came out of the study. This is actually going to be, we've had a series of public meetings that we just concluded. We've taken a significant amount of public input relative to these. And actually, in the month of November, the middle of this month, the COPTA Board of Trustees will be looking at this and accepting this and making recommendations and/or providing approval to move forward with this analysis and these recommendations. If this is instituted as it's proposed right now, we would likely see the new service to take place in March of 2014. We've got a significant amount of preparatory work in the sense of new schedules and new maps. We're going to have to hire some additional folks to address what we feel are the improvements that have been put in here. And probably one of the most significant improvements we make, and that is one of increased frequency. Oftentimes, when you talk in the transit terminology, frequency evolves into convenience. If I have to wait for an hour for the next bus to come by and I've got a choice, I'm going to choose another way of transportation. So being able to reduce that wait time and get it down to 15 minutes or 30 minutes is a desirable achievement, and that's one of the issues that came out, or one of the highlights actually in this, and it came about because of the additional support that we got from the City Council. City Council has identified public transportation as one of its priority items in this year's budget. Last year, the city gave us $13 million to support public transportation. This year, they gave us an additional $1 million that was specifically to support this new design and to increase frequency in our routes. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a number of things. I talked about the fact that what we are desiring to do is provide a more robust bus system. And what does that mean? It means certainly increased frequency, but we also need to look at the fact that we would like to run longer into the evening. Sunday service is something we've heard loud and strong from our ridership that they would like to have. We don't have Sunday service with our bus system. We do have a contractor out there who runs some late night and Sunday service for us, but it is in a very limited area of the city. And so much of the city, as I showed you in the map, we don't cover a large part of it anyway, and we cover an even smaller portion of it on Sundays. Taking a look at park and ride options, where people could park their car and then take public transportation to make the final leg of their connection, reduce the number of single occupant vehicles that's on the road. We also want to talk about expanding our transportation opportunities. Obviously, there's been a lot said about the streetcar, and I think we need to look at the streetcar in the sense that it is just a complement to our existing bus system. And there's been some discussion about, well, it's only downtown and there's more to serve. And I think that's the point, is it's a beginning point. We've talked about what are natural extensions, whether it comes as a streetcar or comes in another mode, making connections to the OU Health Science Center, making connections to OCU, coming south and ultimately connecting to the Core to Shore area and taking it all the way down to the river. You know, those are the kinds of long-range plans that have been built into this. Sometimes our discussions don't address those points, but the fact of the matter is those are things that are being considered right now. There's also multiple corridor studies, 3 in fact, that are going on right now. I talked about how the fixed Guideway study talked about and looked at the Edmond, Norman, Midwest City Connections. The Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, or ACOG, which is our local municipal planning organization, is actually spearheading that study, and we're looking at how do we make those connections, what's the best way to do it in terms of a technology so that you can travel from Edmond to Oklahoma City or go as far south as Norman and use public transportation as the option of choice. Also, I talked about the fact that we looked at it from the standpoint of a regional study. There is a regional transit dialogue that's going on right now, and it consists of representatives from the various surrounding communities, not only Oklahoma City, but Edmond and Norman and Del City, Midwest City, and more. And they're talking right now in terms of how do we develop a true regional public transportation system. And I think the real challenges coming in that are twofold. Number one, what's the governance structure? How would we oversee such an entity? And probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room is how do we fund it? Clearly, we can't have the public transportation system that we want solely on the back of Oklahoma City. It just cannot be done. So we really need to look at how do we bring in the other cities working in harmony here and develop a truly regional system. So we've got a lot going on right now to address transportation improvements. I think as you've heard the other speakers today, you can look at ways in which public transportation can help advance some of the things that they've been putting forward. And I'm very pleased and excited about not only what is happening right now, but where I see public transportation in Oklahoma City headed. And with that, thank you.